Welcome to the official Konas AutoCrystal config guide. I am today here to help you configure your AutoCrystal to PvP on any servers you need to do so. Starting off in anti-cheat, I have my timing set to adaptive because I'm playing on crystalpvp.cc. Timing changes how the CA is timed, so on most servers you're going to want to use adaptive, but you're going to want to use sequential on servers like 2v2t with stricter NCP anti-cheat. But for right now, we're going to have it as adaptive. And now as for rotate, rotations is what makes your head move and look in towards certain places to place and break crystals. And because we're on CPvP, we don't need that, but most servers are going to need you to require rotate. Inhibit prevents you from hitting crystals that you don't need to hit. If they're already going to be exploded, then inhibit will not attack those crystals. Mostly you're going to want to have this as off. For slower and stricter servers like 2B, I recommend that you keep this on, but again, since we're on CC, we are not going to need this. Limit is aptly named because it limits you from spam hitting crystals. So for most servers, you're going to want your limit on full. However, limit mode none will not cap the amount of times that you can hit a crystal, and limit semi was a little bit in between. So for servers like 2B2T, you're going to need semi, but for most servers, you're probably going to want full. Yaw step is a setting that makes you rotate slower. For most servers, you're going to want it on none, but as for 2b2t and 2bpvp, you're going to want it on the setting break. And pretty much no servers are going to require you at full, but again, because we're on CC, we can have it as off. As for your yaw angle, you're going to want this as 0.3 on 2bpvp and 0.1 on 2b2t. But I'm going to keep it as 0.3 because it doesn't matter right now. As for yaw ticks, you just want to keep that at 1 and maybe 2 on 2b2t, depending on the conditions. Raytrace is an extra calculation that checks if you can see the side of a block and place it there. You need Raytrace on servers like Constantium, but you can turn it off if you're on other servers like 2v2t and your interact is on normal or strict and your strict direction is on. Interact changes how you place and break crystals. Typically you're going to want to have this on normal if you're playing on CC. Interact you might want to have on strict if you're on 2v2t, and vanilla is pretty much just useless. Strict direction allows you to place better on stricter servers, and there's really no downside to using it, so I recommend you have it on. Protocol is a setting for 1.16 that allows you to place in 1x1x1 holes, but of course, because we're on 1.12, there's no reason to use it. Confirm checks existing placements and prevents multi-placements while you're chasing someone. Typically, you should have this setting off if you're on CC, or you have it on if you're on 2B or other servers in which you have high ping. Delay is just a tick relays for 2v2t. If you have your limit as semi, you want this at 2. But if you have your limit at full, you want to keep it closer to 4. Break speed and play speed are self-explanatory settings. You want these at 20 typically, but if you're playing on 2v2t and have a limit other than full, you want to keep this closer to 18. Sync controls how breaking and placing is synchronized, and you generally want it to be on merge for most servers with offset between 0.6 and 0.8, depending on your ping. But on stricter servers, you're going to want it on strict, of course. On 2v2t, if you're using limit full, you want this on strict, but if your limit is semi, then you want this on merge with offset 0. As for your ranges, your break range can be 5.2 on less strict servers and 2b, but it should be lower and around 4.3 for different servers. On most servers, your break wall should be at 2.5, and your place walls should be between 3 and 3.5. Swap is unnecessary if you're offhanding, but if you're mainhanding, you're typically going to want this at normal, and you're not going to want to have that at silent. It's pretty useless. Swap delay is this delay between you turning the module on and the swap to crystal. I have this at 0 because I'm offhanding and that does not matter. Ghost delay is the delay between the swap and the hit of the crystal. Because I'm offhanding and on CC, I'm going to keep this at 0. But for 2b2t, you're going to want to keep this at 1.5 and 2b2t PvP at around 5. Anti-weakness is switching to a sword if you have weakness and will hit the crystal with the sword. I have it at off because I use strength pots, but you can keep this at normal or silent, which will not actually swap client side, but it will server side. Terrain ignore will ignore destructible terrain. If you're playing on old fag or if you use webs, you're going to want this on. If you set your target to all, it will find the block that will do the most damage to place a crystal there. If you set it to smart, it will take different environment variables into account, like if they're in a hole or not, their HP and whatnot. And nearest is just the nearest enemy. Security is the self-damage to enemy damage ratio for breaking enemy crystals. It will only break enemies' crystals if they deal self-damage times security or more to your enemy. Typically, you want this between 1.2 and 1.5. Prediction is the number of ticks to predict enemy movement by. Typically, you want this between 2 or 3. And collision on unless you're on a really potato PC. Enemy range is the range at which your crystal ore will start targeting, and crystal range is the maximum distance between the crystal and the enemy. Minimum damage and max health damage are self-explanatory. Suicide health will not hit a crystal if it will bring your health to under that value. Face-placed health is the health at which your CA will start face-placing someone at that value. Lethal multiplier will face-place if you are able to kill your opponent with that many amount of crystals. All the pause settings are self-explanatory, you can set this as you like, and the health is the exact same. The bind setting is the most unique feature out of AutoCrystal. It is why you should buy Konas entirely. You can set your bind by left-clicking on the bind button, in which it will display a graphic that says press new bind. In my case, I have it set to F. You can also right-click this amazing feature to select the hold feature, in which, whenever you hold your bind, the crystal ore will turn on. This is very useful for servers like OldFag. And this is why you should buy Konas, because it has the bind feature. Ow, 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 ow. Ugh.